Hello and welcome to another edition of Spotlight On, right here on S24 television. Today, we go all out to bring a thought leader in a field that is generating a lot of confusion in Nigeria. In the global north, global south, all across the world, there's a little bit of confusion about GMOs. And it's something that we need to dissect little by little for people, ordinary farmers in Nigeria and ordinary people, to understand what it means to say there is a GMO. And from this angle, we'll be talking to an expert in that field, an international expert in biotechnology. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Salima. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming as well. So we'd like for you to give us a bit of background context about who you are to set the tone for this conversation.
Okay, so my name is Abdaki Brian. I'm from Kura. Kura is a small town in Kano. My background is actually agricultural-biotechnology. I was trained. I completed my PhD work on molecular biology, so I did a lot of work on agricultural biotechnology. Associate professor from Ahmadu Bello University. Though over the years I've been away, working the intersection between agriculture, biotechnology, policy, capacity development, and scaling technologies. I have come to be part of the story of agricultural biotechnology in Nigeria from 2001.
Oh, that's over 2 decades.
That's right. So right from the time Nigeria was actually drafting its agenda on biotechnology, at the time we didn't really have, a standard policy or articulated position around biotech. But today we have, I would say, Nigeria is one of the leaders in Africa in agricultural biotechnology, with support from the National Biosafety Management Agency. So basically, this is my background. I think it's also interesting to mention that I was trained in Brazil within the Embrapa system. Embrapa is the largest Brazilian research corporation. They have over 14 research centers. So I worked in one of their centers which specializes on biotechnology and genetic resources. So during the time, one very remarkable thing I would say is that I managed to develop and patented a technology that is directly linked to the topic that we're discussing
Today.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. I know for a lot of Nigerians, when you mention biotechnology, GMOs, there is a lot of confusion. If you're not a science student or an engineering student, because that's the field that people feel, oh, you probably get some basic knowledge about these things. We'd like for you to throw light on what it means to say something is genetically modified. And then coming to the fact that apart from saying GMOs, because there are GMO crops, I suppose, and there are GMO other things that we don't know as people. For me, I'm also confused, and I would really want clarity on that. GMOs and then GMO products. What clarity would you like to give us on those two?
Okay, so let's start with the O in the GMO. And O stands for organisms. So it doesn't take much to realize that this is a misnomer. The misnomer in English is when you name something, and then you realize that this is not the name. Because the O is an organism. So if you have a plant, a living plant that is genetically modified, that's a genetically modified organism. But if you have soybean, if you have oil from soybean, or from a soybean that has been genetically modified, the oil is a product. Yeah, is a product. So you don't call it GMO. Even apple, pear, whatever, those are not organisms, right? They are products.
So they are products.
Yeah. So there's this confusion around what is around the use of GMO literally, and so we need to clear that. So now, genetically modified organisms are organisms that have had their genetic content engineered such that they express certain traits that are desirable. And those traits are often obtained from other sources And these other sources, external sources, could be from a similar plant. So let's say you have a soybean plant that is erect, tall, produces good quality grains, but it's not tolerant to heat, or it's not tolerant to certain stress in the region it is grown. But you have another variety of soybean somewhere that doesn't really produce as much grain, but it's quite tolerant. So as a molecular biologist, I will go into the lab, look into the genome of this tolerant
and the non-tolerant one.
Yeah, and then extract whatever gene is responsible for this tolerance and put it in the cell of this plant
that is non-tolerant
but produces good grains. So when I have that gene inserted into this new, or the new individual I have is a GMO, is a genetically
modified organisms.
And in fact, we don't really use the term modified as such because it's too broad. So in most cases, in many scientific papers, you see genetically engineered organisms, genetically modified, sometimes used loosely. So people need to understand that distinction. Now, if the trait that I have tried to engineer in this soybean is to increase the yield of the oil from it, and I get oil out of it, then that is a GM product, the oil. And it's interesting also because by the same principle, you can get the trait from a bacteria. Get a quality from a bacteria and insert it into a plant. Sometimes it is the bacteria that you use as a vehicle for the protection of some desirable products. That desirable product could be, and I'll give you a very, very common example, insulin. You know the insulin that's used
for diabetes,
right? So almost all the insulin that's consumed is by definition a genetically modified product, because what scientists did was to identify the gene coding for the expression of insulin in humans, pull it out, insert it in a bacteria, create a system for that bacteria to multiply and express that insulin, harvest it in natural product, put it in a bottle, bottle it, and then it's sown as insulin people consume it simply. So there are several medications
that are genetically modified, engineered,
and generated in this manner. But of course, for some reason, the controversy is never really on them. It's almost always around agricultural and biotech products in agriculture.
Around Nigeria, if you talk about GMOs, the instant reaction from people is, no, we are not going to deploy it because of the side effect, the myths, misconceptions about GEO now, it be say genetically engineered. So I would like for us to break that down, because what is making people not totally trust this is whenever there is new thing, there is resistance to say, oh, there are, say for instance, adoption of AI, people, it's taking away our jobs, it's doing this and that. And that's the resistance we always get. Even when computers came, when the modern cameras came, all of those things we resisted before we accepted them. But for us as a very, I'll say heterogeneous society where there are different people, you're trying to get into the minds of people to understand what this means for them, especially in this era of insecurity where farmers are not able to really go to their farm. So for people who can utilize this opportunity, and there is maybe the so-called climate change that is affecting yields and all that, in what simple terms would you maybe debunk the misconceptions about GMOs? Oh, they've got bad effects on the soil. They will make people not live long. The life expectancy of a lot of people will drop if they use GMOs and stuff like that. Would you like to throw more light on, oh, this is what it means when you use GEO crops or seeds, and then when you use the yields from those seeds to do maybe genetically modified maybe products, and people use it, what does it mean for anyone that feels, oh, there is some kind of side effect to using these things?
All right. So first of all, we all agree that if we continue to produce the way we do right now,
Yes.
we will not be able to meet our demands.
Yes, food insecurity.
Food insecurity. Nigeria, like many other countries in Africa, we have a very huge import bill. We import a lot of food. So it means you need to at least double productivity. Now, if you continue to use this, and you're talking about by 2030, 2050, our population will be hitting towards around 400 million, where are you going to feed this people? So it means you need to adopt certain technologies that will really improve the yield of all the crops that we grow. And that does not mean that the GM technology is a magic bullet that will solve this problem. It is just one of the many other tools that can be applied to improve our productivity. Sometimes, in fact, you may not need to apply a new technology. Sometimes all you need to do is to improve in the agronomic practice. Maybe it's a space between one and another. Maybe you need to do you need to conduct the right soil analysis. You're putting too much NPK on the soil, perhaps maybe it doesn't need as much potassium and so on. So I want to make that clear that GM technology is not a magic bullet that will solve our problem.
Of insecurity, food insecurity.
But it will help. Now, to generate a GM product, a GM crop, the average time it takes is about 13 years from experience.
Over a decade.
Yeah. From the time that you said as a scientist, oh, you come together in a multi-stakeholder space and you agree, we have problem with cotton, we have problem with maize, we need to improve, we need to double the yield. Now there's this technology that's already been practiced in Brazil or elsewhere. Let's try to apply it. And then we go to the lab in IAR, we work with colleagues, and then we come up with the GM cowpea or GM maize. We take that to the field. First, we take it to a greenhouse, from the greenhouse to a confined field. We take it, we cross with local varieties, you end up with a new. So you take it through generations. And then finally, you take it to the national plant system that registers this. It would have a registry for National Variety Release Committee. It sits every year, I think once or twice every year, to review. And before it gets to that, you must have subjected it to extensive biosafety analysis. That biosafety analysis means you will test, you compare it with normal, non-transgenic crop, you check the effects on human
body
consumption. You look at different biochemical and physiological parameters. You check the impact on the environment. All of that apply. There's already a protocol, an international protocol for that. It's called the Cartagena Protocol, and Nigeria signed that. Just the same way, for example, we signed the WTA specific instruments, around regulating our export. So by the time you have a GM technology or GM crop put here and say, okay, here, farmer, come and buy this or take this, it has gone through this series of processes, this series of biosafety analysis. And that's why government has established under the Biosafety Law Act 2015, the National Biosafety Management Agency. I think it's under Ministry of Environment.
Okay.
To ensure that as we generate or as we adopt technologies, including GM technologies, our health is protected, our environment is protected. All the international regulations are followed. And the safety of GM crops has been established. We we have studies from WHO, from European Food Safety Authority, globally confirming the safety of GM technologies, GM crops, before they are used. So, but the controversy usually comes because there are several dimensions to it. First, as you said, people fear innovation. They fear what they don't know. So there's that panic, there's that misinformation. There's a whole industry of conspiracy theory around it. But also, there's an economic war going on around technologies like this. And that economic war is this.
So we'll get to the economic war. You can take your time. I think there are certain things that Nigerians would always want to find a problem somewhere to say we are not adopting this social thing. And you mentioned IAR. So for the benefit of the viewers, what is IAR?
So IAR is the Institute for Agricultural Research.
Okay, IAR.
It's an institute in Ahmadu Bello
University. Zaria.
I've worked there with colleagues with the way to work. In fact, it's the one institution where we, for the first time, established the first laboratory that has what we call gene gun. Gene gun is the machine that you use to transform plant cell.
Okay.
To conduct this genetic transformation.
Okay.
And currently there are 3, we call them events, of transgenic events. That's genetically modified crops that have been released by Nigerian government with, the stamp of the national NBMA to say, okay, yeah, go ahead and plant this, they're safe. It's cotton, maize, and cowpea.
Okay, so in your opinion, you've already laid the ground foundation to say GMOs or GEOs are safe because they go through a process. But that's not the case for ordinary Nigerians. They feel like for everything that we bring up, that the system allows a loophole kind of to say people don't go through due diligence to do all that you do. And so maybe the environmental consideration, our well-being and all of that is what is making people to feel like they're not going to accept to use GMOs. Now, for somebody that I know was part of the reporters that actually even tried GEO beans at some point, there was just simple well-being issue, and people started linking it to, oh, it was the GMO beans that you ate and all of that. To make it simple for an ordinary Nigerian that, okay, the government did not cut corners in doing their research and all of that. What is that one thing that you like to tell a Nigerian about GEOs that would resonate and make them feel at ease to deploy them?
Okay, so I think what I will say, the first thing is to say that there are already 3 genetically modified crops in Nigeria. So if you see a big, very huge tomato on the market, or big pineapple, or big watermelon, it is not GMO, because Nigeria will never allow anybody, to bring in this smuggle this technology without ensuring that
going through processes.
So the 3 GM crops are cotton. We don't eat
cotton, yeah.
Right? Cowpea.
Maize.
All right. Every other variety, every other crop you see, it's probably either a hybrid, people are already used to hybrid, or some grafted or vegetatively propagated crop. Now, in terms of safety, these food crops, that's the cowpea and the maize, they have only been released after we have the National Biotechnology Research. NABDA. It used to be NABDA.
Yes, National Biotechnology Development Agency before NABDA. They changed it to something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that agency is responsible for coordinating all of these activities. And these technologies were actually developed by our own scientists here in Zaria, in NABDA. in the office.
Some will say there is no trust between Nigerians and the scientists. Maybe that's why they feel, because we've got that thing. If something is not coming from abroad, maybe an expert from abroad, a lot of our people might not deploy it because they feel just simple issue of the healthcare in Nigeria. So someone will say, why would a political office person go abroad to get medical care when there are doctors, expert doctors in Nigeria that can do the same? So there's that distrust, mistrust among the populace and the public office people. So to break it down for them is, oh, we don't trust the scientists. So tell us the rigorous process that you went through to
So
do this.
so before I take you through that, we speak a lot about decoloniality.
Yes.
This idea that only good things, all the good things could
Come from abroad, yeah.
It's completely absurd.
It is.
Because knowledge is universal.
It is.
Knowledge is universal. Look at me. I'm from Kura. Do you know what is
I saw.
Kura? And okay, somebody will say it's a village. It's a very,
rural.
Went to this place in Brazil. We sat in a lab and, I generated and patented this technology. It's up there. And when I look back, and even then when I looked on the bench, all the things that were there that allowed me to put that product on the table are things I could get in Zaria. Yeah. And that's also what really gave me also the push to, I invited my colleagues. They went there for more training in Embrapa Center, where I was. We came back, we got some grant, established the center, and we did it. Colleagues, I don't want to mention their names, but these are Nigerian scientists using the highest level scientific procedure, so of course we collaborate with international organizations and with other universities from the West. For example, sometimes what you need is just the sequence of the DNA. We call it sequence. DNA is encoded in the form of, we write it in the form of letters. So sometimes what you need is just the sequence from some colleague, a collaborator in Brazil, in Australia, and they give it to you, and then you synthesize that sequence and use a vector, what we call vector, transform a bacteria, take the bacteria, put it in a plant cell, induce the plant cell to acquire that sequence. So let's assume that sequence will confer resistance against bacterial blight, or it will confer advantage to the plant so that it improves there's what we call starch branching enzyme in cassava, so that you have more starch. Or it could be a trait that will improve or increase the yield, the quantity of oil from soybean. So if you put it in that plant cell and you subject it to a series of processes such that you regenerate a plant. So this one plant, right? It's an individual. It's an event that expresses that trait unique. But you have to take it through this series of process. First, make sure this trait that you have inserted is stable. You cross it to the next generation, up to the fourth generation. Then you say we have what we call Mendelian segregation, from the name Mendel. She studied genetics. People that students, they remembered Mendel. So it means you are sure that trait has been inherited by the fourth generation. Then from there, you take it to the field. In the field, sometimes when you bring it to the field, it may well be that particular line, let me call it line of plants, may not pick up in the soil. So it means you have to also bring a local variety that's already picking up in the soil. Cross them. There is process of pollination.
Okay.
We
Cross-pollination.
Yes. You cross them until, so this is a very tedious process. until it comes out. Once it comes out and it's stable, then you take the grain, thrash it, produce flour, get your rats, feed them, check their blood glucose, their blood, whatever, all those, that gamma of physiological parameters, monitor them over years, over months, check several tests. There are a set of tests that have been prescribed in the Cartagena protocol, to ensure that human or biodiversity is conserved. So in addition to this test that you conduct, laboratory rights, you also conduct tests in the environment. What will be the possible impact of releasing this kind of new product in the environment? And you check and you get to a safe level.
With this, we'll go on a short break. When we return, we'll talk on the economic fight in this area of biotechnology and genetically modified crops, genetically modified organisms, and genetically engineered organisms. I beg your pardon. They would also be right back. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's still Spotlight on S24 television, where we're talking with an expert in the area of biotechnology, talking about genetically engineered organisms, or you call them crops or products. Welcome back to the show, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Now let's go back to the topic of the economic war.
Yeah.
Even though we'll still touch base with a few more points before we call it a wrap. Now let's get the overview or what you mean by like economic war in that regard.
Okay, so look at it this way. Nigeria and many other African countries, we are part of what the so-called tropical belt. We have tropical regions in many African countries that stretches to Southern America, parts of Brazil, some parts of the US, China, and so on. If you pay attention, what you will notice is that most of the crops that benefit from this genetic modification processes are crops that are grown in the tropics. Soybean, cowpea, maize, rice sometimes, and so on. Now, these crops, you grow them, the conventional ones, you grow them and then you apply a lot of fertilizer, chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, and so on. Now, if I have a company that produces these pesticides and inputs that you heavily rely on, it will not be in my interest that I then come up with a new technology that requires less of these herbicides, less of these pesticides, or no herbicides or no pesticide at all. So this means it is possible that I can mobilize some people to come and somehow fight you, tell you, your
Side effects.
Exactly, they're trying to, and so on. And because it's science, a bit complicated, not, they create all sorts of images. There was a video I saw of a gentleman or someone who claimed that they planted something and then by the next season, the soil is there. This is biologically impossible. What erodes soil is soil erosion, years of use, or maybe sifting contamination due to mining and so on. You don't plant something and then by next season, it kills the soil. It's not possible. When I saw some of those videos, I could just simply tell that these are content creators trying to really create contents, because this is the topic of discussion. And also to talk about the economy. So coming back to the economic war. So there's this economic war going on of those who advance the technologies and therefore potentially, blocking the market of those who produce chemicals that the technology, does with the
yeah.
Exactly.
Like the crop resistance that you get from the GMOs, yeah?
Yes. And then sometimes the
Resistance
debate,
pest, I mean.
exactly. Sometimes also the debate could even take philosophical and ideological dimensions. Some people say you're trying to claim God, right? You're trying to say what God has created. Now you want to change it. But what they forget, Halima, is that agriculture itself is an invention of human being. 4,000-5,000 years ago, we did not have these crops. What is natural, if you say you don't want to intervene in what God has created, is to leave everything in the wild as it is. That is what, God created. But we invented and refined agriculture right from the Indus Valley. If you read the history of domestication of animals, domestication of crops. If you see the ancestor of the modern day maize, it is nothing like maize. It is one black grain, doesn't look at all like a maize. Yet, it was our ancestors from many, many years ago that first identified a line from it and then planted it and then kept on planting until we ended up with the maize. So what we're doing in GM technology is literally doing what our ancestors used to do, but at a shorter time. But of course, now with knowledge of biosafety regulation and so on. So there's that ideological dimension to the debate. There's the economic dimension also, this fight that sometimes they're not really clear. But the science is clear. The science is universal. And what the onus is on us to empower our own scientists, because sometimes there could be claim of some imperial imposition or extractive or exploitative introduction of technologies that will take our resources, and so on. We can invest in our own homegrown technologies, using our own resources, using our own talent. We have people with the brains to do these things.
Yeah.
We know them. We can do it. And you do that and you put the product on the table, because innovations only emerge under the right innovation ecosystem. When you are challenged, innovation is when somebody, for many, many years, people used to carry their bags to the airport, right? For many, many years, we have had wheels. It was not until someone decided, no, let's put a wheel to a bag, and then now we can push it. That's innovation. So it is when conditions like that, when innovation conditions are created, that new technologies emerge. And it is only when you are in that situation. So what the point I'm trying to make here is that no one will bring technology for you for free from anywhere.
Of course.
So you have to develop it yourself and relying on your homegrown solutions. And we have scientists, all these three transgenic events that I've mentioned, they were developed here. Of course, with partnership, it's in some cases with partnership with some international groups, but they were developed by our own scientists. And there's one thing very, very important. I have to say it. It's called maximum incremental social tolerable irreversible cost, MISTIC for short. You know what that is?
What is it?
It is a model, it's an economic model that guides you, that can guide policymakers to either adopt or not adopt a technology, including GM technology, in the context of our bioeconomy. So when you conduct an analysis, a MISTIC analysis around the adoption of genetically modified soybean or maize, right, in Kano, for example, Kano state government might decide that, no, we don't need this. Or it could say, let's invest more and scale. Or the model could tell you, pause, stop. This is not what we need. Maybe what we need is to invent a new implement that can improve the yield. Or it could say, Now let's go back to the drawing board. Let us redesign this project. So, and this is science. You can actually sit down, bring your experts in economics, in biotechnology, molecular biology, physiologists, including, even people that would ordinarily not be on the same table when you're articulating your research agenda, like the ulemas, the religious leaders, yeah, bring them on board. What is the problem of soybean in this community? And let us try to address it using this economic model.
I know sometimes last week on Tuesday, someone mentioned at the opening ceremony of the Digital Nigeria International Conference that Africans are now moving away from being consumers of technology. So when you made the point about let's develop our own technology in this regard, is something that we should empower young persons to be involved in. Away from the economic impact or economic war that you've spoken about, if there are things that you think the government needs to do differently for people to adopt or for young persons to come forward with technology in the biotechnology area, what would you say?
I think that will be supporting or catalyzing what I will call innovation to impact pathway. And I'll break it down. What it means is that you bring people from various sector, but converging around the same problem, the same issue, whether it's cowpea, for example, or cassava, encourage them to co-create and come up with research ideas that they can use to leverage on digital technology, the tools that we have, AI, leverage on conventional breeding technology. Talk to our grandparents, get to find out the indigenous knowledge, around certain problem. For example, I'll give you an example. You could say that maybe there's this crop yapia. I don't remember the name. I don't know the name in English, right? And other medicinal plants that have been shown to have some sort of medicinal properties. How can we package them so that we produce superfoods, super smart foods out of them? Sorghum, we are in the Sahel region. So even this issue around the conflict that we see, we can create a solution where you massively produce animal feed from, let's say, cactus, edible cactus, for example. That I have seen with my eyes in Brazil. At some point, it was tried in Jigawa State. So in a nutshell, government needs to really encourage this innovation ecosystem, bringing especially the private sector to invest. And I see beyond just agriculture. There are even more impactful innovations and products that we can churn out if we look within us. Somebody commented that the best and most performing companies in Nigeria are yet to even start. This is because of the enormous and the huge potentials that we have, not just in the agri-food system, in the agri-food sector, but in many other sectors. I give you an example. In Brazil, my colleagues, what they did with soybean? They identified the gene that codes for the spider web. They inserted it in soybean cell and induced that to grow into a plant. And then they created a big bioreactor system that produces that cobweb in huge quantity, which they harvest. And when they harvest it, the products that comes out of that is used to produce bulletproof jacket. You see, so who knows? We might discover something by studying the biomass or the ecosystem of snakes in Kaltungo. There's this place in Kaltungo, right, in Niger. A lot of snakes. If you go in Basari, for example, maybe there are some rock types there that can specifically be the natural habitat for some bacteria that probably produces some metabolite which we can extract and insert in a plant, use it as a bioreactor to produce vaccine or to produce an antibiotic,
and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So the space for innovation is just huge. Yeah.
So I see. If you are to advise the Nigerian government on the way to go about getting the brains that would do all of this work, what would that advice look like? Considering there are talents, so if you go to this technology agencies like maybe NITSDA or like the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy and maybe the creative economy aspect, there are young persons doing a lot. You find videos making rounds on the internet where a young person make maybe a glasses that actually assist someone with their vision, or a glasses that monitor certain thing, or it's camera that do some surveillance for you, etc. In what ways can we bring all of these people together, relevant people, to improve the biotechnology maybe sector for Nigeria to be able to utilize that for economic growth in the long run?
Yeah, so I will say that we need to have our own, and I'm sure, I suspect there is. It's just that almost every policy, every strategy in Nigeria, as in many other African countries, will be somewhere in an office. It is impossible that, like, I'm the one who just comes up with the idea, or let's have a bioeconomy strategy for Nigeria. I am sure there is. And within that framework, there are some quick win solutions that we can leverage and implement. And I've seen the impact. You can see the litany of activities. For example, the videos you mentioned on TikTok, that's an example. But I think the government needs to be more deliberate in creating the enabling environment. I have noticed that now there's a National Agricultural Development Fund, right, created to finance, that agricultural development. There's NIDA and many others. These agencies, they need to talk to each other, because our problems are not just agriculture. They are intersectional. They need to cross talk so that we can together catalyze this economic transformation. But there's one tool from the work that I do, that we used, which has worked very well. It's called Innovation Platform. Innovation Platform is a physical or virtual space where you bring people, multi-stakeholder actors within a group, each coming to interrogate a problem with the sole purpose of generating economic benefit out of it. So, and I'll break this down to you. Imagine, instead of you as a researcher simply deciding, I will give my project students topics to go and extract, maybe produce, generate methanolic extract of some plant that I suspect to have medicinal value. And then they run the analysis, and then we publish papers. I keep publishing until I become professor, and that's it. The knowledge sits on the shelf. Maybe instead of that, I go into the city or into the village, in the community, speak to the Mayangwa, get, the sugarcane seller, get the bus drivers, talk to the Hakimi, get a banker, there's a bank there, multi-actors, all of them, let's say, around cowpea or around that particular value chain, and say, what is your problem with this thing? What do you think we should do to double your income out of this? What is the one thing that you think, if we do it, you will sell 5 kilograms of sugarcane instead of the 1 kilogram that you sell now, right? So the scientists will be there, the food safety expert will be there, all of them, and they'll all be bound by a legal instrument, an institutionalized innovation platform And with that, they can move and come up with solutions, local industry, local solutions that can really improve their economic and lead to economic transformation. So I think that's
for the want of time, I would just quickly ask this last question. So is it safe to say the misconception, misunderstanding of GEOs or GMOs is basically economic war or not?
It's not just economic. There are other interests, other factors. Yeah, but for me, as a scientist, I would say let's pull out the facts. What does the science say, and let's counter check. Let's do all the peer review required, and demonstrate that okay, this is safe. It's safe, or even if it's safe, is this what we need? So that's why that mystic analysis is important, because sometimes what you need is not to adopt the GM technology. Sometimes what you need is to change the dosage of fertilizer. Sometimes it's to use no fertilizer. It's to use no fertilizer at all. Sometimes what you need is zero-till farming, and so on. So it's never
just a blanket.
Yeah, a blanket. Okay, and neither it is a magic bullet that will solve
the food
the food insecurity. So it's a mixture of things, and that we have to really continue to dialogue, I think, and discuss as new things emerge. I say that we missed the green revolution. We probably missed there's the blue revolution. I don't know if you've heard of that. There's the white revolution of milk in India. Now we are probably missing the gene revolution
as well.
Yeah, because of this idea. Yeah, this resistance and this, being stuck in this debate when new technologies are already in the pipeline. They're already coming up. Now we're talking about the fusion between digital, AI, and biology. Where, for example, imagine a future where just in your room, sitting in your room, you will know what is the level of lymphocytes in your blood, what is the level of the different hormones working, what is your blood pressure, what kind of possible diagnosis could be made out of. You literally know your biology.
Yeah.
On your own without necessarily
going to visit a doctor.
was going to visit a doctor.
Yeah, that's a lot to digest. I know I can go on and on. But at this juncture, I would like to draw a curtain on the conversation and move it forward to another time when we be able to probably get more insight into what this biotechnology, GEO, GMO, and whatever the name is that is attached to this is for us, whether on the internet, I mean, maybe on Zoom or something like that, or even physically when you come back to Nigeria anytime soon. Many thanks for joining us on Spotlight on S24 television. See you again next time, and we'll be bringing more insightful conversation with different people making different strides in their endeavor. Many thanks, and bye for now.